Chapter 12. If webinars are awesome marketing tools, why do most of them suck? Webinar N, a kind of online conference that each participant experiences remotely at his or her own computer, connected to other attendees and the event via the internet. It is typically one way. From the speaker to the audience, with limited audience interaction. First off, we apologize for the slightly crude headline. But it's a headline-ridden frustration. Here's why. Webinars are a wonderfully robust and lively marketing tool and an effective way to reach your prospects or buyers. Or rather, they can be. A 2009 study by Business.com found that a whopping 67% of business leaders who rely on social media for business information seek out relevant podcasts or webinars. One that screams opportunity. And at least some businesses are responding. Research by Outsell shows that B2B companies plan to increase their spending to produce webinar-related content by 26%, according to its survey of more than the United States companies. So if webinars are so awesome, then why do many tragically underperform? Why is it that so many webinars remind us of the sad visage of the middle-aged former high school valedictorian, now tending customers and his broken dreams at his hometown gas station? See Figure 12. 1. Figure 12.1. Most webinars look something like this. Webinars, of course, are web-based seminars for viewing or listening to online. They are typically a combination of audio and PowerPoint, although they sometimes incorporate video, too. Webinars take place on web conferencing platforms, which can be either an application downloaded onto each attendee's computer or a web-based platform. The attendees access the meeting by a link or meeting invitation distributed by the webinar host. Attendees and the businesses that host and love webinars because they can be robust. Webinars are fun, engaging, and dynamic. In other words, they act and feel more tangibly alive than, say, a white paper or case study. Attendees can hear the speaker, watch the slides or video, and, in short, interact with the content you produce in a whole new way. Interactive and social. Done right, webinars feel like real-world classrooms or conference rooms. Participants get a chance to ask questions, as well as chat with the speaker, the moderator, and each other. Outside of the webinar itself, participants can interact on social back channels like Twitter, which only amplifies their visibility, of course. Less intimidating. Maybe your prospects aren't quite ready to feel the call from your sales team, but they are happy to hear what you are all about in a no-pressure webinar, in which they are one of many. Affordable. As online conferencing technology has evolved, the cost of the platforms has increasingly come down. Webinars are especially reasonable when you compare the cost of an online seminar with the cost, not to mention hassle, of holding an in-person event. Broad-reaching. Which means you can accommodate far more people, too. Instead of inviting a few prospects to an in-person event, you can invite hundreds to a virtual one. Geographically Dubuque. J. It doesn't matter whether the people you are trying to reach are in Dubuque or Dubai. They can all be accommodated at a virtual event. A team player in the content mix. Webinars can be reimagined as many things, including podcasts, articles, blog posts, or on-demand events. Effective. Remember that earlier stat from Business.com. Further research from Brain Today backs it up. Event or conference presentations rate second to referrals and personal awareness as the top method for how professional services companies initially identify the firms they work with. 3 door openers. Webinars give you a reason to reach out to prospects by phone or email both before and after an event. Sounds great, right? But of course, all that is accurate and sustainable only when the content of the webinar itself really grooves. Unfortunately, webinars often suck. For various reasons. They are free event focused more on lead generation than value. Too many webinars promise great content, but the sponsors or hosts don't really push the speaker to deliver on that promise. Rather, the sponsors care more about getting names to feed the sales funnel, or they want to use the webinar as a platform to sell their products or services. This is what our friend Sean Howard calls getting pitch slapped. In the end, that hurts the credibility of the sponsor and the speaker, and makes everyone suspicious of the value of any free webinar, says Shelly Ryan, who was instrumental in growing the online seminar program at Marketing Profs, and now runs Killer Webinars.com out of Houston, Texas. Speakers don't understand that presenting online is not the same as being in front of a live audience. It's harder to present online, to an invisible audience, than it is to present in person. You can't look people in the eye or feed off of the room's energy. You also have to have exceptional content, because the content itself is what will engage your prospects. You can't compensate for boring, unprofessional-looking slides or a monotone voice with your winsome good looks and personality. Online, you must keep the attention of people's eyes and ears, Shelly Ryan says. Otherwise, they're checking email and reading their horoscopes. No one asked, what if we have to emergency land in the Hudson? Live webinars are still vulnerable to technical glitches, or a no-show speaker, or a rough presentation style, Shelly says. Practice, test, rehearse, and plan for a possible disaster. Just in case. Marketing Profs has been producing webinars since 2003, which is forever in internet time. Since every internet year is equal in time to a dog year, that's how quickly the technology evolves. A 7-year tenure installs Marketing Profs as a clear veteran in the business of creating, producing, and marketing webinars. What follows is a blueprint for generating webinars that ignite your business, based on the lessons learned by Marketing Profs, as gleaned from interviews with Shelly Ryan as well as Vice President Valerie Frazee, in addition to experiences of other leaders in the space. How to create and produce awesome webinars. Here are 25 keys to creating webinars to ignite your business. Follow this prescription to conceive of a single webinar or a webinar program. 1. Ask, what's keeping our customers up at night? Like any of the content you produce, the first question of content development is always, what information do our customers or prospects want? What problems are keeping them up at night? How can we help? You probably already have a sense of what the burning issues are for your customers, but for some a quick assessment of other content you're producing like popular blog posts or most downloaded white papers or ebooks can confirm what resonates with buyers. 2. Create momentum. Your goal should be to educate or inspire your customers, to be a resource and educator, but also to make it clear that you are there for them when they're ready to buy. What do you want your audience to take away? What do you want them to do? A key advantage to a webinar is that it allows you to start turning content into a relationship immediately, says Patrick Cahill, a partner in Rally Point Webinars, out of Boston and San Francisco. Ask, what topics will spark more conversations? WLLH will you Klein LS Powerick says. 3. Go big, or go tactical. Marketing Profs produces 2 flavors of webinars, how-to webinars that offer specific, tactical information, and alternatively big thinking, inspirational, or high-level strategic seminars, often featuring big names in business or marketing rock stars. An example of the former would be a killer Facebook fan page, building it, keeping it fresh, and integrating it into your marketing or today's top 5 SEQ essentials. In the second category would be a seminar like Jeremiah I'm Scaling Social Business, how brands can build their business now in position for what's next in social media. Similarly, many companies create broadly appealing webinars to generate broad awareness and leads, and then host smaller affairs to a more qualified base of prospects. The webinar for the second group might include a product demo, for example. The first would likely not. 4. Create your webinar registration FOW wisely. If you're focused on lead generation, select form fields vocabulary relevant information slur LU flag who LLS leads, without making the form so long and cumbersome that the visitor will abandon registration. And think about your long-term goals. Do you, for example, anticipate making this webinar a series? If so, consider adding a checkbox for opting into future offerings and webinar invites. 5. Write the STOY. In his book Beyond Bullet Points Microsoft Press, 2007, Cliff Atkinson points out that starting to create your presentation in PowerPoint, before you have your key points and logical flow worked out is like a movie director hiring actors and starting to film, before there is a script in hand. A really good webinar needs foundational structure and support. Don't start by firing up PowerPoint, start by mapping out an outline of both your story and quick ideas, for accompanying charts and photos. You can use Word, a notebook, a whiteboard, or chalk on the sidewalk. The point is to write down key points, and assemble them into some sort of structure. Presentations and New Writers, 2008 author Gary Reynolds calls this planning analog. Though you may be using digital technology, when you deliver your presentation, the act of speaking and connecting to an audience to persuade, sell, or inform is very much analog, he says. 6. Show, don't tell. Webinars allow you to marry voice, images, and sound and create something that teams with life. This is a boon especially to B2B companies or service firms, which are often selling an intangible thing that a buyer can't easily connect with. So show, don't tell. Use case studies, client stories, or colorful anecdotes to express your ideas and thoughts. Show your products or services in action, as they help customers do their jobs better, run faster, jump higher, or whatever. Doing so makes your business human and accessible, because it explains your business in a way people can relate to. 1. Have compelling slides. Telling a great story extends into the slides you create, so your PowerPoint should be visually compelling. Here are some easy but powerful PowerPoint tricks. Streamline your slides. Don't crowd your slides with tiny text that's hard to read. It's far better to create a companion handout with detailed information than it is to deliver text-heavy, dense slides. A good rule of thumb is to use a font no smaller than 32 point, which is ginormous. The font you are reading now is closer to 1 point. With a font that size, you won't have room to say much on the slide, which is, of course, the point. Offer one idea per slide. Don't toss too much at your audience at once. Package your story with one idea on one slide at one time. Use authentic video and images. Boring stock images on presentations or in other marketing materials, for that matter, detract from your presentation. Don't let your slides look like everyone else's. Seek out images or video from actual customers or employees, or look for interesting public images. For example, search Flickr to find unique images. Go to Flickr.com, search Advanced and search only within the Creative Commons license that allows use with proper attribution to the original photographer. And then, of course, remember to give attribution in your presentation. 8. This is a really important and critical point. You felt compelled to read this particular point, right? That was because it carries a compelling title, and titles are important. In fact, titles are as important on webinars as headlines are on blog posts or articles. Your webinar title is both a promise of what an attendee can expect the content to be and an indication of how it will be presented. For example, which of these 2 seminar titles draws you in? Insights from Social Media Research or The Naked Truth, What's Hype, What's Not in Social Media? For more on writing great headlines, see chapters 1 and 13. 9. Find a compelling speaker. Your webinar might rely on a guest speaker, who will present to your audience for a fee or for free in the latter case. Usually in exchange for the publicity. You could tap the tried and true, recognized experts or high-profile thought leaders, legends, gurus, sages, teachers, web celebrities, academic professors, or book authors. But sometimes those people work the circuit and so might not say anything that your audience hasn't heard before or couldn't hear elsewhere. A great way to uncover lesser-known but equally compelling talent is to practice what and call social prospecting on sites like SlideShare or YouTube. Search keywords relevant to your industry to find people who have something to say and who can say it in a fresh way. Whatever approach you take, Establish clear expectations and guidelines with any speaker, Shelley Ryan says. Set expectations early, and don't give in too much, she adds. By the way, social prospecting on other platforms is also a great way to uncover people with a passion for creating content. That's how it finds many of the contributors to Marketing Profs. 10. Moderators matter. Choose your moderator wisely. A good, responsive moderator can make the difference between an awesome and an awful webinar. A good moderator improves the experience for the audience, says Shelley. That includes keeping things moving at an energetic, brisk clip, paying attention to feedback or audience chat, and responding both publicly and privately to specific audience comments, and managing the questions from the audience, knowing when to interrupt the speaker to ask a clarifying question, for example, or posting relevant links in the chat window from resources referred to during the presentation. That person also moderates the Q&A period at the end or throughout the presentation. This isn't as easy as it sounds. Sometimes attendees ask unintentionally vague or inarticulate questions, and it's important to get at the question behind the question, Shelley says. Of course, you also have to ignore the stupid or inappropriate questions. 11. What about video? If your e-conference platform supports video, go for it only if the video is short and it's truly relevant to the topic. It's tempting to include video just because you can, even though it might not further the narrative. Also, be aware of how different formats of video are experienced by the audience. For instance, there are two kinds of flash video files, SWF and FLV. With an SWF file, you have control over when it starts. With an FLV, the audience has player controls. That can really throw off a presentation. And one more thing, even today there are still people with slow internet connections. Keep in mind that your video might still be queuing up for them right when you're ready to move on to the next slide. Warn those people ahead of time. 12. Practice and rehearse. Schedule a rehearsal ahead of the live webinar day to run through procedures and go over the flow of the webinar itself. Specifically, make sure the speaker and moderator are comfortable with the platform and controls, test that their internet connections and hardware are stable, and check whether the speaker's slides look and perform as expected. You don't have to run through the entire presentation, but it can help to have your speaker at least start the presentation, to be sure he or she is comfortable both advancing slides and speaking in a natural, conversational tone with an invisible audience. Be sure to avoid the dreaded bedtime story type of webinar, in which a speaker reads the words on the slide rather than telling the story in his or her own words. That is particularly grating for attendees, who likely read faster than the speaker speaks. 13. Reimagine your webinar. Plan to reimagine your webinar in various ways, just as you would any other content you produce. The team at Rally Point Webinars lays out what a reimagined webinar might look like. Here are their thoughts, which we've amended slightly. Pre-webinar article. Before the presentation, send prospects an article or publish a blog post that gives prospects an idea of what to expect and helps drive them to register for the event. Tip: split your list and test 2 article titles to see which generates greater interest. The one that draws more interest is the one you use or adapt for the webinar title. Pre-webinar podcast. Interview the speaker about the topic of his webinar. An interview feels more lively than an article, and it also becomes a teaser for the upcoming event. Pre-webinar podcasts also boost attendance. AVICMO Paul Dunn says that publishing a podcast on the registration page of a webinar can increase the conversion rate from 10% to up to 50%. On-demand webinar. Record your event and offer access to it, on demand, on your website. Over time, your company can build a library of on-demand events. PowerPoint presentation PDF. People like printing a hard copy of the presentation slides. We don't really understand why. But they do. Webinar transcript T. Consider having your webinar transcribed and offer the text as a download from the site or as a special offer to those who attend. You can also use the transcript to create smaller pieces of content, one or more or a series of blog posts, for example. You can inexpensively outsource transcription to a virtual assistant. Many of them will use voice recognition software for a first pass and then edit to clean it up. Or try a transcription service such as CastingWords.com, which charges 75 cents to $2.50 per minute. Post-webinar podcast. Excerpt the Q&A from the webinar as its own separate podcast. Or interview the speaker to get responses to unanswered questions from the Q&A. Post-webinar articles, or follow-up blog post. Publishing additional stuff based on the webinar gives you another way to extend the life of the webinar online and keep it active. Produce. 14. Encourage audience members to interact. You might have attended webinars that don't. An attendee types a question or comment into a tiny box, then wonders whether anybody on the other side noticed it. Better web conferencing tools allow everyone attending the webinar to chat live during the presentation, using a window alongside the main presentation screen. This kind of webinar has a whole different feel, because it gives participants a sense of community and a shared group experience. If it sounds a little scary to share everyone's comments and questions, you can usually moderate the Q&A chat, too. Most conferencing tools will let you moderate the commentary by selecting what to show and what to keep out of the stream, Shelley says. Some web conferencing tools even let you control callers who want to submit audio questions by phone, but more webinars rely on text interaction. By the way, some audience members will find the chat an annoying distraction. When Marketing Profs surveys its audience, 85% generally love the interaction and 15% typically hate it. Eliminate the distraction for those 15%, suggest that they switch the slides to full screen mode to hide all the chatter coming from the rest of the audience. 15. Encourage speaker-attendee interaction. Build some interaction into the presentation itself, too. Stop to answer incoming questions instead of saving them for the end. Add a relevant poll or two. No one wants to have a one-way conversation in this Web 2.0 era, Shelley says. Draw attendees out by reaching out to each of them during the webinar itself, via private chat if your platform allows it. Ask, are you getting value out of this presentation? Do you have any questions for the speaker, suggests Patrick Cahill. Depending on the size of the audience, that might necessitate more hands on deck. In a modest-sized 200-person webinar, for example, that might mean up to 6 staffers on hand to work the room and reach out to individual attendees. That sounds like a lot, maybe, but Patrick says it's worth the trouble. It's a little thing, but it adds tremendous value to upping the level of response and engagement. 16. Encourage chat on social back channels. Make it easy for those active on Twitter to talk about it there, either before or during the presentation. Creating a short, searchable companion hashtag allows people to find and share nuggets of information about your webinar. A hashtag is a kind of Twitter shorthand that groups related tweets with a single phrase or word preceded by the hash symbol. Twitter hashtags like the well-known Follow Fried or FL or Mark Determined, they help spread information on Twitter, while also helping to organize it. As you might imagine, it's an especially favorite tool of conferences and event organizers. Some web conferencing platforms are experimenting with incorporating live tweets, for example, enabling attendees to post comments directly from the webinar to Twitter, LinkedIn, and Facebook. 17. Record your event. One of the biggest advantages of web conferencing software is that it allows you to record the live event, including audio, slide presentations, Q&A sessions, and polling results. You can then reimagine that recording in various ways to deliver maximum return on investment from your webinar. 18. Optimize for sharing. Upload your webinar presentation and slide notes to SlideShare, and make sure they are optimized for search there. Use keywords in the presentation title and transcript. Tag your slides with plenty of relevant words so that users can find your content during searches. 19. Spread it around. The SlideShare site isn't the only place you can embed your SlideShare presentation. Load the SlideShare application onto your LinkedIn profile. The same thing goes for your Facebook page or company fan page. Embed the SlideShare widget into your website's homepage or BLDG. 2 other ideas. Add narrative to your slides with livecasting. You'll have to record the audio MP3 separately. Slidecasting will synchronize the slides and audio. And finally, SlideShare offers businesses an option for a feed to set up custom, branded micros. It's essentially a company channel. Doing so allows you a central resource for PowerPoint presentations, white papers, and webinars. 20. Carefully craft your final slide. Your final slide is a kind of visual takeaway for attendees, so be sure the slide visually inspires whatever next steps you want attendees to take. Usually the final slides and presentations are among the lamest or ugliest. But think of your final slide as the last word in a book or final point in a blog post. Create a slide that either converts browsers into buyers or inches them closer to doing so. For a simpler sale, give your audience a link with a compelling limited time discount offer. For a more complex sale, offer related content that furthers engagement, perhaps a downloadable checklist or worksheet or a companion guide. Online marketing strategist Bob DeStefano ends his webinars by offering attendees a link for a free website checkup, which applies the concepts he teaches in a webinar in a specific, relevant, personal way. 21. Plan for a disaster. You might have rehearsed and planned to within an inch of your life, but still stuff happens, right? You may not be called upon to land a plane in the Hudson River, but you should plan for the unforeseen and mitigate where you can. For example, get your speaker's cell phone or emergency numbers in case they don't show. Be sure they have their slides printed out so they can present from paper. If they lose their internet connection, have a message prepared in the unlikely but still possible event that there's a total crash of the web conferencing platform. As with any disaster, preparedness is key. 22. Get feedback. Create a short survey, 5 questions tops, to get feedback from attendees on the quality of the content and their satisfaction with the overall experience. Included a survey link on the final seminar slide, but start mentioning it early, before attendees start signing off or before Q&A ends. It's important to encourage attendees to click through immediately, while the event is fresh in their minds, rather than emailing the survey link later. A key question Marketing Profs asks, which serves as the basis for its 5-star rating metric, is this: would you recommend the seminar to a friend? It's important to do something with the aggregated responses quickly, so the audience believes you when you say you really do care about their responses. Marketing Profs posts the star rating on the webinar library page usually within 24 hours. 23. Follow up promptly. Follow up within a day of the event, either by phone or by email or both, Patrick Cahill says. Include any promised collateral, including copies of the presentations, the link to the recorded session, and so on. Extend the relationship still in the teaching mode, Patrick says. In other words, the approach is not can we offer you a demo? But rather, do you have any new questions that have gone unanswered? It's also important to follow up with those people who missed the live presentation, too, and offer a link to the recorded session. And by the way, capture the same registration information for the on-demand session as you would for the live event. You want to qualify these leads just as you would any others. You can also include links to any post-event content you produce, like a podcast of the audio, an article by the author, or a transcript of the Q&A. 24. Measure your event success. Watch your audience behavior in each webinar. Are they logging out early or sticking around? If the speaker isn't keeping their attention, you might not want to invite that speaker back. After the event, track the number of registrants and the attendance rate, the quality of leads generated, and the rate at which they converted to buyers. Compare them to past events or predetermined targets to gauge your event's success. 25. One final thing. Notice how we got all the way through this list and didn't mention how to choose a technology platform. That's because this is a book about content, not technology. But here's some fundamental advice. You have many web conferencing technology platform options, including On24, Citrix GoToWebinar, Adobe Connect Pro, Microsoft's Live Meeting, and Cisco's WebEx. Many are good, but none is perfect. Don't be intimidated by price or swayed by salespeople. Find, test, and pay for only the features you actually need.